Hello and welcome back to Death and Taxes, your weekly live stream podcast from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. I say weekly, but of course, we've been away for the last month. We've had our winter break. I've been off doing Army Reserve training, but back now. So we're back into the groove for the coming weeks. I am one half of your hosting duo, John Humphreys, and joined, as always, by Gene Tunny. Gene, how you doing?
I'm going well, John. It's good to catch up with you, Private Humphreys. Well done for your success in completing the Army Reserves training. It's a great thing to be doing. So well done.
It was, I got back from it and I shook a few hands from the people I did it with and said it was fun, and then had to catch myself. I don't think fun is the right adjective for the recruit course. It is not designed to be enjoyable, but it was an experience. I'll put it that way. So, but anyway, I'm back in normal life now. I can let my hair grow a little bit if it works. And get back into the groove, get back into economics and politics and all things fun. So look, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, but I've been out of civilization for 3.5 weeks. The recruit course, they take away your phone. You don't see newspapers or TV, so you don't know what's going on. It was a nice little break, like a digital detox, so to speak. But it does mean I've come back basically with a month away from the world, and I've got a lot of catching up to do. So, Gene, it's on your shoulders for the next hour or two to catch me up on what has happened in the Australian world of politics and economics. And you as well, dear listener, if you're listening along. We do, as always, take comments, questions, criticisms. Please feel free to write them in. And as you do, we'll try to get to them, perhaps as we're talking, perhaps at the end. We normally save them to the end if we have time. But Gene, I know this is a big question. What did I miss? Like, were there any major events, or can I basically take a month off every winter and get away with it?
Well, I don't think you can take a month off every winter, because you missed one of the most consequential federal budgets in decades, really. I mean, arguably, it was extraordinary, and unfortunately, we had foreshadowed. We knew what broadly was going to happen, or what was going to be in that budget. It went a bit further than even we would have thought. So I suppose you did miss that. So there was that. There's also the news about the economy. The Australian economy is looking weaker than we even thought. We're back into this, potentially going into a per capita recession. We've had per capita GDP fall, as I'll show in a moment. And this is related to weak productivity growth, sluggish economy, but still strong population growth. While you were away, the Australian population, according to the ABS's population clock, ticked over 28 million last week, which a lot of people commented on, and it just goes to show just how much we're growing. Then it raised all the usual concerns about, are we building enough houses? Do we have sufficient infrastructure? The types of things that we talk about a lot on this show. So that was a big story. And
can I just say, I fear I'm stealing all your thunder from the Gene's Roundup. So
should we just roll into that, or because I started essentially going into it?
Yeah, but I believe you do have some slides to go with that. So as always, everyone, if you're not following the economic news of the week or the month, as the case may be, fear not. Gene will come in here in the next 10 or 15 minutes, catch you up with everything you need to know. So, Gene, what do we need to know?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, John, we had a fairly weak GDP figure come out last week, 0.3% in the March quarter, which translated into negative 0.1% in per capita terms. And what we see, so in that pink line on that chart, we've got the value of gross domestic product adjusted for inflation. So it's in real dollars or constant dollars. And for the last few years, it's basically gone sideways. It's, I mean, in fact, it's a little bit lower than where it was at the peak. So this is a big part of the reason that people, I think, are feeling frustrated. We've essentially had flat or stagnant living standards for several years. People aren't feeling that the economy is improving, that their lives are improving, and as we often emphasise in this show, the big driver of that is productivity. It's productivity, which is the key determinant of living standards. I mean, holding all else constant, but it's one of the big drivers of living standards, and that's what we're seeing in the blue line, and that fell during the quarter. It's substantially lower than it was at before, or actually just before COVID, if we see. So it's just a terrible situation that we've got with this economic stagnation that's occurring at the moment, and potentially going back into a per capita recession. So that was the first thing that the first bit of news I think is worth discussing. I better
Yeah, well,
check.
that graph been very helpfully, I think, put together there by Macrobond. It's very similar to a graph I've been putting together quite regularly, showing, and now it's up to 10 years. I started doing it when it was 8 years, but if you look at that blue line, there's basically no productivity. There's a little spike in the middle, which can basically just be explained by the anomaly of COVID. So it wasn't actually true that productivity spiked and went down. You can basically just cut that mountain out, right? That mountain is a bit of an anomaly. But if you look at that blue line going from 2016, it's pretty flat up to 2019, and then ignore the mountain, and then it's pretty flat from 23 to 26. That's now 10 years. That's the lost decade of productivity that we talk about regularly on this show. And that's, I think, it's not really a news story for us because we've been republishing a similar graph for years now. But it is the big story that underlies a lot of the economic news, and is causing a lot of the other economic problems. And as you say, that pink line, or magenta, I think, as you'd prefer to call it, dipping down at the end. Look, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I'm constantly frustrated by the media's fixation on the GDP number, because as you'd know, you flick on the news or open a newspaper, and most of them are saying GDP went up by 0.3% in the last quarter. But as you've posted here, per person, it went down by 0.1. And per person is the only version of that statistic we would care about if we care about human well-being, right? If that's our goal, that is what you would look at. So it is infuriating that too much of the media keeps looking at the wrong number. But it looks like we're odds on for going back into a per capita recession. And as you can see from that pink line, the economy's been going backwards pretty consistently for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So that's not pretty.
Yeah. And it's been pointed out that one of the only reasons that we ended up with any positive GDP growth, and a GDP growth that is a weak result, 0.3%. If you annualize that, you get about 1.25%, whereas we should be hitting 3%, 3 to 4%. If you think about what Australia's trend growth rate has been in the past, it's a really terrible result. And what's keeping us above zero is, it looks like, it's that investment in data centers. Thanks to the AI boom. So I suppose that's one positive. But otherwise, yes, things are not looking flash, and that's confirmed by consumer sentiment. I mean, that's well down. People are not happy. They're concerned about cost of living. They're concerned about mortgage interest rates. there will be a reprieve next week. There's practically no chance the Reserve Bank will lift interest rates next week due to the state of the economy, and they've already had a few. They've hiked the cash rate up to where it was before they started. To the peak the previous peak before they started cutting, and then figured out they needed to actually start raising again. What I think they'll wait and see what the impact of that is, and so just the state of the economy, they're probably not going to increase next week. So no need to be concerned about that at this stage. But who knows? I mean, if inflation remains persistent, I'll talk about that a bit later. Maybe there'll be a rate rise later in the year. It's still,
although we should say, Gene, it's also no reason to get your hopes up if you are a net saver. Yep. It is a quirk of Australian economic commentary that all discussion of interest rates is done through the prism of assuming everyone's in debt. Which is probably a fair assumption. Most people are probably in debt, but therefore we're always hoping, or the political commentators are always saying they want it to go down. So John, apologies to all of the savers out there who are hoping interest rates would go up on their savings, but it looks like you may not be getting that extra bonus next week.
Well, John, isn't the case we have the third highest level of household debt in the world or something like that relative to income?
Yeah, but it's a very fair assumption, although if we're in a world where we think maybe having that high amount of debt is a bad thing, and that those people who are in a net savings position are actually making the right decision, and then we interpret everything through the prism of how to hurt the people making the right decision and how to help the people making the wrong decision, it's an odd way as the only way to talk about. Look, I agree. Most people would want interest rates to go down, and so fair enough. And of course, we're not giving financial advice here, so don't take anything to the bank from us. But from all accounts, it does seem like interest rates will be on hold for the near future.
Yeah. And the other bit of news, and this is related to this declining GDP per capita, is this population ticking over 28 million. I took this screenshot a few hours ago, so the number would be even higher now. But yeah, we're hurtling towards 30 million people by the end of the decade, I suppose. That's possibly what we could see, or within 5 years or so.
Less than 5 years, you'd think.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, so yeah, by the end of the decade, then.
Well, let me ask you, Gene. What is your instinctive gut reaction to that when you say 28 million? I remember back, this is showing my age, back in my day, I remember when it was as low as 16. But so 28 is a big change over the course of my adult life. But
yes.
What's your reaction to 28?
Well, I'm shocked because in a generational report, I think Treasury forecast would get to 28 million or so, around that magnitude, by 2040. So I don't know, was it something like that? And we're like a decade or more ahead of schedule. So we've got, I remember when it was 13, that was probably the 1970s, I imagine, mid-70s.
I was going to say, Anna, you're showing your age. You've outed yourself for an anonymous commentator.
But yes, so yeah, I think it's, look, I mean, you know what we've been saying on this show all along. I think we've got serious issues about how the level of population, the rate of population growth, and our ability to absorb it, our ability to cope with it, to be able to provide the infrastructure we need, our ability to maintain a socially cohesive society. I think that's been threatened, and we've seen that with what happened in Bondi. And I mean, that's a big part of why people are moving towards one nation. So I think it is a huge issue.
Yes, I agree with all that. But I got to say, there's an important caveat, at least for me. I mean, we can have different opinions. It's more fun sometimes when we do. But I have no qualms with high population numbers. My concern isn't the population number. My concern is the rate of change. So, I mean, I understand, the only way you get a higher number is to have a big rate of change. But I mean, the number isn't what spooks me. I mean, if Australia was always 50 million and stayed around 50 million, I wouldn't be complaining, oh no, the number's too high. Right. So it's not the level that concerns me. It's the rate of change. I worry that the rate of change is creating social, cultural consequences that we're not ready for and we're not enjoying. And also just that the government, not just the government, infrastructure spending isn't keeping track with it. And it's, obviously it's having an impact on house prices. But I mean, I do want to disentangle those two things. I'm not a person arguing that Australia needs to only have 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 million people, that it's urgently important for us to slash the total numbers. I would like to slash the number of new people showing up, but that's because it's the rate of change that concerns me, not the total level. It's like a stocks versus flow issue. I have no concern about the stock. I have a concern about the flow, if that makes sense. You got any thoughts on that, Gene?
Yeah. Look, I think mostly I agree with you. So just want to understand why you think it's a flow issue, because with a reduced flow, it gives us more time to build or to catch up with our infrastructure, and it also means we can vet the migrants more. Is that one of the possibilities?
I don't know if it's
better migrants,
really,
or we could. Sorry,
it's not so much about vetting for mine. I am skeptical of the ability for us to really vet migrants, other than to do things that are politically incorrect, such as say, we just want English speakers, or have more cultural discrimination. No, to me, it's about not the vetting, but the assimilation. If you bring in someone quite different and you bring them in slowly enough, they will adjust to Australia. If you bring a lot of people all at once, they're not really required to adjust to Australia. Australia ends up having to adjust for them. And so I think it's this rate of bringing people in that is causing a lot of the social and cultural tensions that we are seeing. I mean, you can bring in someone who's quite culturally different as long as you're only bringing in, 2 people per year, and then they will have to adjust because there's only 2 of them. If you bring in 2 million of them, then that rate of change scares me much more. So it's look, maybe you could do better vetting, but it's not the vetting; it's the adjustment once they're here, and the ability again for the country to adjust its infrastructure. I mean, You don't just turn around and build a dam on a dime, right? You don't just have extra roads and bridges the next day, especially when so many of them rely on government. The government isn't always the quickest actor and most nimble on their feet. So again, that rate of change, I think, is much easier for us to be able to cope with. And also for the building of new homes, that happens at a certain pace. So with all of these things, it's easier to manage immigration if it is done slowly and carefully.
Yep, absolutely. Just on the...
Which is also to say, by the way, this will be... Apologies, but...
That's okay.
The political zeitgeist of our day is just to be adamantly and completely anti-immigrant. And I think compared to my pro-immigrant friends, they would say that I'm already there. But I would still say that I haven't got a problem with the concept of immigration if it's done slowly enough to be ensuring that it is benefiting the country. And I think some immigration will benefit the country. I just think that we've been doing it so quickly now that we've lost track of what it is the goal should be with immigration. So I guess my pro-immigration friends would still say I've gone anti-immigration, but my anti-immigration friends would say I'm squibbing it and only going halfway. But I'm not trying to compromise for the sake of compromise. I genuinely do think immigration can be a good thing if it's done slowly enough to benefit the country.
Well, I think that's true, John. I agree with you there, and it didn't seem to be a problem until or the public were accepting of it. As long as we kept the border, we had a strong border, which they had, which was one of Howard's great successes, I think. And by doing that, by limiting the illegal migration, he managed to get acceptance for the legal migration program. It's when it started taking off. It did start taking off toward the end of the Howard government, so he doesn't get full marks. And it's associated with all the universities and foreign students and the revenue from that, and that's been a big part of the problem. If we had it at the level that it was in the 1980s or the 1990s, I think we'd be fine. We wouldn't be having all of these issues now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you were letting Howard off a bit light there, but you pivoted at the end. Look, that was the old conventional wisdom, is that Howard cracked on illegal migrants so you could have more legal migrants. I think that is what he did. And at least in hindsight, I think we can say, I wish he hadn't. Crack down on the illegals, that's fine, but he used it as cover for increasing legal immigration, and he did it largely to be able to pad out the university sector, to increase funding to the universities. I think he was responsible for spiking the immigration levels beyond what was ideal. So I think Howard has a bit of blame in this matter. By the way, as I said, my anti-immigration comrades out there would call me a squid going only halfway, and on cue, we simply don't need any immigration. No benefit to the nation. Look, I'm not meaning to get into a big argument with Anna at the moment on this, but I think there clearly can be benefits from immigrants, just by virtue of the fact that you can hire them. They can hire you, right? I mean, there can be, if you get the right immigrants, an economic value. And look, it's not just about economic value. I get that. That's been a big part of the pushback. I think it's quite easy to show you can get an economic value from the right migrants. And I think the migration skeptics have been very right to push back and say life isn't just about economic data. If too many people come in too quickly, they can really start challenging your social and cultural cohesion in your country. And I think that is very correct. But then my answer is, all right, so slow down the immigration, slow down the rate of change. Hopefully that mitigates the cultural and social aspects and allows us to still get the more obvious direct just benefits you get from being able to interact with good quality migrants. But anyway, I'm not going to die in the ditch over it, but that's my take on the issue for today. And I imagine it'll be hated by both sides, as compromised positions so often are.
Righto. On the house prices, you mentioned house prices before, John. Jim Chalmers has a plan for that, as I'm sure we'll talk about later. And we are starting to see, now this predated the budget, but we are starting to see those house prices fall in Sydney and Melbourne. And in the month of May, they were flat. So the hedonic value index, this clever measure that the Cotality people, formerly CoreLogic, have of average house prices across Australia, that adjusts for the quality of the houses, how many bedrooms, floor area, all of that sort of thing. It has dwelling prices flat and then falling in Sydney and Melbourne. Brisbane's still growing, but a bit slower. I mean, still growing at a high rate. But we'll probably see that coming off in the coming months. And there's the indication from the auction clearance rates. They've fallen dramatically in the week since the budget because of all the concern about these investor tax policy settings. And I mean, I think there's a bigger issue too. I mean, how could you trust the government in the future with taxation? I mean, it's just an extraordinary situation that's occurred that I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later. But we are seeing the housing market react possibly rather strongly. I mean, there are other factors. The market was starting to turn down already. The interest rate increases that we've seen, the economic slowdown. So it's not just what's happened with negative gearing and capital gains, but I've no doubt that they will have an impact on it for sure. Okay, the other thing.
Well, I was going to ask before you jumped on from that, because that was going to be my question on that. What do you think is driving this? Because there are multiple potential culprits, and I suspect it's probably several of them combined. But do you have a suspicion for what's at the pointy end of this story?
Well, I think what we've seen like if you look at those data there, that's the data up to the end of May, and so most of those patterns, like you see, there is that trend. There's already a trend downwards. So I think we will see that. I think it'll intensify due to the budget, but I think most of the change will have been due to the interest rates and the just the slowdown in the economy, the cost of living, budget constraints, etc. I think that's probably going to be a bigger impact than those investor tax policy settings, but there's no doubt it'll add to it. I mean, I think it could add a few percentage points. I mean, some people are forecasting even bigger impacts from it. I think we just have to just see how far the market goes down. The auction clearance rates have really plummeted, and I think I've seen some figures around 20-30% in some markets. So yeah, there could be a big impact from these tax policy settings. But I think my feeling is that most of it will be due to the higher interest rates. So we've got Taylor. Yeah. So Taylor's written, I know of a few people who are actively looking to buy investment properties, not anymore if this budget goes through. Yep. And I mean, one of the big things
I'm
too
not
is
surprised by that. I suspect that the downturn until now has been mostly caused by just the tightening of interest rates and the impact of the budget when we feel it is more likely to come with a bit of a delay, right? I mean, people didn't.
Yes.
Not too many people just crashed their contracts on the night of the budget, I suspect. Maybe I'm wrong. But if the budget goes through, it's going to be a slow burn. I suspect, like a lot of these bad policies, it strangles you slowly so that you don't really notice it. I mean, if the pain was immediate, if the government introduced a bad policy and the pain was immediate, everyone would associate the pain with the policy. It would become very unpopular. They would have to unwind the policy and we could fix it. The problem with bad policy is it's often a slow burn. It builds up costs in the economy, slowly screws us over. And so it can be hard sometimes for politicians to notice what they've done. So I think that might be the case. This will strangle us slowly, especially the negative gearing, I think, is a slow burn. I don't think that's going to be a sudden hit on anything.
Well, it depends, John. I mean, I think it's the case, like from what I've heard from people in the banking sector, is that like this, and you see the reports of it. I mean, the fact that you can no longer negatively gear an existing property, that reduces the amount that people can borrow from the banks, and so there's going to be an impact, like a almost immediate impact via that channel. I mean, very significant reduction in borrowing power because it's affecting your cash flow as an investor. So, yeah, I think it could be even quicker than that. But I mean, as a general principle, I agree with you that it's probably more of a longer term impact, except that because of this channel through the borrowing capacity, it may be more immediate.
Yes. Well, I mean, sorry, Lyndon's got another point here that I'd love you to comment on. It's quite an interesting one here. I noticed Brisbane is doing, or at least was doing, quite well up until a few months ago, as was Perth. Lyndon suggests here is Brisbane doing well because of the Olympics?
Yeah, I agree. I disagree that the Olympics build is cranking up. I suppose it is in a way. They've put the fences up at Victoria Park and they've had to move on a lot of the protesters. So I suppose it's cranking up, but boy, we're really behind. I'm starting to worry just about our ability to deliver this in time and not end up in a Montreal situation where we've got the stadium not fully complete by the end, and you get into a situation where you're close to the deadline and the unions go, oh, gee, we've got the ability to really just really tighten the screws and get some higher wages to actually finish this project. So yeah, I'm a bit concerned about that. But yeah, generally, Lyndon, I agree with you. I think a lot of it is the Olympics. It's excitement about Brisbane. It's also just, I mean, we've still got significant interstate migration. People want to live here and in Queensland versus New South Wales or Victoria. And I mean, why wouldn't you?
Well,
really?
As they should, obviously. But
absolutely.
I mean, the impact of the Olympics, I would have thought, shows up in expectations, right? So you're buying something you think its value will hold up. You think its value will hold up because, the Olympics is a few years away. So it's going to trickle down that way, even if you see no action on the ground. And I agree. I haven't seen too much, but.
Well, it was a lot of investor interest. So you saw that of the new lending that was that was the new loans that were being written, excluding refinancing in Queensland. I think we had about 40% being written for investors. So there's been a lot of investor interest, and I think a lot of interstate investor interest in Queensland because of the Olympics, which, when you think about it, is that really sensible, given that it's a couple of weeks, or maybe you got Paralympics too, but they don't get the same crowd, do they? Unless
well, I think if I'm being generous, because I suspect it is just people getting a little bit carried away, but if I'm being generous with the potential rationale, what the Olympics often does is it creates an artificial boom in infrastructure spending, which often can be a misallocation of capital. But hear me out with devil's advocate here. If we are already misallocating capital by underinvesting in infrastructure, could it be that the mistake created by the Olympics offsets the mistake made by our politicians underinvesting in infrastructure anyway? And that increase in infrastructure increases our capacity to be able to sustainably build livable housing and accommodate a growing population. I'm being quite generous with my interpretation there, but it's a bit of devil's advocate. But that might be the rationale. The infrastructure boom that is needed might come because of the Olympics.
Potentially, but gee, I mean, I still think they're going to struggle to fund the infrastructure that's necessary to support population growth, because they're spending billions on this new Vic Park Stadium. We're going to get some lovely new sporting facilities out of it, but that doesn't necessarily address the infrastructure gaps that we have, does it? That's not where we need the spending. It doesn't alleviate the bottlenecks on Centenary Highway out to Ipswich. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily the infrastructure spending we need. That's what
I haven't looked into what they're actually planning on doing. You would have thought they'd take the opportunity to upgrade transport. You've got to get people to and from a lot of events very quickly in an Olympics.
Oh, yes, they do need to do that. Yeah.
I mean, Sydney upgraded the transport out to what was Olympic Park at the time, which is now a big residential area in Sydney. And that upgrade to the transport through that system was probably something that the current residents in that area appreciate.
Well, look, at least, Can I just say something about the transport? One thing that they'll probably have to do is they'll probably have to buy back the concession for the air train. So one of the big problems they've got is that you've got this private operator that owns the rights to the air train, and they're making a significant amount of money off of that. That's a bit of a cash cow for them because they've got that monopoly. Well, I mean, they've got competition with Uber, of course, but they actually do. I think they're doing very well out of that, and the government's going to have to buy that back so it can have reasonably cost-effective transport from the airport to Brisbane City during the time of the Olympics. So that's going to be an additional cost burden to the government associated with this Olympics, because otherwise, how's it going to work? I mean, I think they need the train, that air train, as part of the transport solution for the Olympics.
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't actually looked at any of the details of what they're going to be doing the infrastructure spending on for the Olympics. I'm just creating a theoretical case for what one might say were they to be more generous than I am about such things normally. And a lot of it will come down to the competence of our planners. And as you would know, I have no inherent faith in the competence of our planners, but maybe they'll surprise us.
Well, I think we should do a deep dive in a future episode, because it's I think there's a lot of interest in this Olympics issue for sure. But good question. Good question. Good point, Lyndon. Good stuff.
Indeed. Do you want to keep going for what else?
Yes. Well, the final thing we should talk about is inflation. And the big news earlier this week, there was a new inflation figure out for the US. So inflation came in at 4.2 through the year, 4.2%, and that's associated with the petrol price increase, or gasoline as they call it in the States. The inflation, the core inflation that the Federal Reserve is concerned about. I mean, one of the measures is the CPI less food and energy. It's not necessarily their preferred measure, but it's one of the ones that they look at. it's still below 3% in the States. So we probably won't see the Fed lifting their rate at this stage. It looks like their inflation expectations are still reasonably under control. So we haven't got that core inflation getting out above 3% yet. And I think it just goes to show that the problem we've got in Australia, because we still have that core inflation figure above 3%. We've had similar headline CPI above 4%. The difference between us and the States is that we've got the core inflation, what the trimmed mean here in Australia, it's outside that nice and comfortable 2 to 3% range. So we've still got this problem of persistent inflation. Now, we need to see how the economy reacts as it slows down. But potentially we're in a situation where we can have the economy slowing down and stagnant living standards, stagnant wages at the same time that we've still got an inflation problem, partly due to significant government spending. And we have to maintain tight monetary policy. So we could be in this really nasty situation there.
Yes,
So, John, that's
the term, of course, as you know, but for our viewing audience, stagflation, I think, was the term that became popular in the 70s when we last faced this situation where it is expected in normal Phillips curve Keynesian thinking about the economy that you have one of two problems. Either the economy is overheating, so great, the economy is going well, but you've got runaway inflation, or the economy is weak and unemployment's going up and GDP is going down, but at least inflation is low. So normally it's expected you got one problem or the other, and then if you have both at once, stagflation, which is perfectly possible because the Phillips curve is bunk, but we are seeing it potentially now. And as you say, look, it's notable there, that blue line, it never really got below 3%. And I think you'd agree with me when I say the problem Australia had is we moved much slower than most other countries.
Yeah.
Right. We moved slower and we moved less. And so we had to keep rates higher for longer because of that, because we didn't nip the problem in the bud to start with. And we are now suffering the consequences, not just of government overspending, but of RBA meekness. I don't know if that's the right word, but unwillingness to act decisively.
So. Very good point, John.
Another quick point to note about the US rate there. One small little caveat or thing to note is the Australian RBA targets 2 to 3%. The American Fed targets 1 to 3%. So their midpoint target is 2%. And if you can flick back just one step on that, you can see that yellow line there is trending very close to the 3, which is well above the 2 target. Having said that, of course, Trump has been exerting quite a lot of political pressure on the Fed to have rates low, to cut them earlier when he was having this argument with the Fed last year. And I imagine he'll be keeping up that political pressure, arguing that it is below 3. They shouldn't move. So
I mean, I guess it is possible they could lift later in the year. I think there was a strong jobs report, or according to the data the other week, or was it early this week? So yeah, potentially they could lift later in the year, but at the moment they'll hold fire. So is that right? It's 1 to 3. I should have remembered that. That's their band, but the target is 2. But they're okay if it's within a 1 to 3 range.
Yes, well, I would prefer a 1 to 3. As you know, I'd prefer Australia to have a 0 to 1 band. But so little steps forward.
Yep.
By the way, Lyndon Harnell posts not a question but a hack for any people in our audience who are from Brisbane. I have no idea if this is true. But apparently the hack to avoid the air train from the airport, it's free from domestic to international. Then there's a free shuttle bus from there to Nunda, and then you're on the Brisbane train system, which is 50 cents a ride. So I don't know if that's true, but anyone who is a regular user of Brisbane trains, you can check out if that works. And if it does work, come back and say thank you to Lyndon Harnell. There you go. We're all learning something here. So had you got to was the Australian inflation slide the last of what you had for us?
That's the end, John. It's that's the end of the roundup.
All right. Well, let's see what else I had here from that I was going to ask you about that had happened. You've covered most of the points here. I've got one question for you though. That I was out of touch with the world for nearly a month. I come back, and oil prices are down, but the war in Iran seems to still be basically as it was before I left. Very very little happens. I imagine Donald Trump has declared victory 8 more times, but it doesn't seem like much has changed. So the oil prices are still higher than what we'd like them to be, but they have not steadily increased to a point of strangling the world. So I assume that means some oil is getting through the Strait of Hormuz. But what do you know what's happened? What is the details of that?
Well, I think other sources, it's more the fact that supply in other parts of the world has increased, hasn't it? I mean, the US and for instance, so yes, it hasn't been as adverse an impact as we initially expected. Of course, I mean, let's just see how long this thing lasts. I mean, we could be speaking too soon, but yeah, I think the whole Iran thing, I didn't cover it this in this update because there wasn't really anything new beyond what we've already talked about. But so far, the dire forecasts of running out of fuel and just the huge impacts on industry haven't eventuated. I think some of the farmers are doing it tough here in Australia. There are I've seen those reports, so there's no, I don't want to deny that. And you see reports of strawberry growers. I saw that earlier today, how they're potentially going to be losing significant amounts of money. So it is challenging. I don't want to deny that, but it hasn't been the economic catastrophe yet, and that probably speaks to the ability of markets to respond. It's why do we need a fuel czar? Like we've got a fuel supremo who's been paid some ridiculous amount of money to guarantee the fuel supply in Australia that someone elbow appointed. But it reminds me of that old joke about the Soviet official who visited the mayor of London's office in the 1960s, and he asked to meet the man who controlled the bread supply for the city of London, as if there's any one person who does it. So yeah, I think the market seems to be doing what it needs to here so far.
Yeah, I think the other thing is the worst expectations were based on the idea that if the war kept going, there would eventually be striking oil infrastructure. And it looks like everyone's stepped away from that, right? I mean, apparently they're bombing again over the last couple of days. But again, apparently they are very explicitly not bombing each other's energy infrastructure.
Oh, yeah. In the Gulf states, you mean? So they're not...
Well, US is bombing Iran again, but they're saying we're not bombing your energy infrastructure. Right. And then Iran seems to do tit for tat quite explicitly. Yeah. So if they're not having their oil facilities struck, then they're not striking oil facilities in response. So that is, something to be thankful for. It'll be very interesting to see whether the fertilizer shortage eventually plays through the global food markets in a way that is noticeable, or if people have found a hack to work around that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
We shall see. Anyway, moving on to our next topic here. Hopefully, dear listener, you are following us on Substack. If not, go there now. austaxpayers.substack.com. Please sign up. It's free to be on the mailing list. It allows us to keep in touch with you. And if you're on the mailing list, you will receive an email, like maximum of 1 per week. None for the last couple of weeks while I was on army training, but 1 per week. And we're back this week. So you would have, if you're on the list, seen our email today. And that was about the government's proposed changes to the capital gains tax regime. We've touched on it a few times already in this episode, some of the changes that the Albanese government is doing. Look, I think we spoke about it a bit before I left. And as we mentioned at the time, the budget had, as we understood it, elements of, let's say, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this is how I framed it in newsletter today, and there are some elements of good. The increase in there was a working tax offset, which is basically an increase in the tax-free threshold for people who earn wage income. There was a simplification measure allowing people to just take a $1,000 deduction instead of trying to itemize all the deductions. And there was this loss carryback provision. So there's a bunch of good little changes there. So I don't want to just totally crap on the Labor government. But having said that, you get to the end of the good. There is the bad, which I would, in the bad, classify the changes to negative gearing and the changes to taxing of the trusts. I'd say it's bad, but not a disaster, just run-of-the-mill bad. Unfortunately, we've got used to bad. But then we get to the ugly. And I think the ugly, if we could just stop one thing about what Albanese is doing, I'd be keen to hear what you have to say about this, Gene. But if we could just stop one thing, I think it would be their changes to the capital gains tax regime. I think that is probably the single thing they're doing that is going to create the most economic damage. Right? Some of their other changes will be slightly damaging. This one, I think, is damaging enough that we should pull out the stops and say, no, this is where you really need to do a rethink. This is too important for you to be playing games with.
And look, I think taxation of trust too, the minimum tax on trust is going to have significant adverse impacts.
Yeah, I certainly don't like that, but I put that in the bad so I could just pick one ugly. But I'd be interested, you can tell me afterwards if you think that which one is
no, I agree. The CGT is the worst because it's going to affect capital formation. It's going to affect entrepreneurship, and we know that how economically damaging high taxes on capital can be. There's a lot of theory and evidence on that. So I think that's a good point. But I'm concerned about what's happening with the trusts, and there's an argument that is going to constrain the amount of philanthropy there, and even Andrew Lee's starting to pick this up, and he's starting to hear these messages, and it looks like he's sympathetic to possibly who knows what he'll do, but I saw on LinkedIn apparently somebody had a conversation with him, and they were saying he's sympathetic to this concern around what the taxation regime for trusts could mean for philanthropy in the economy. So, let's hope they see sense. I think there's some sensible people in the government. I think Andrew's one of them. There's two Andrews. Andrew Charlton's another one. I think Daniel Molino's sensible, but unfortunately, Jim Chalmers has decided to just ramp up the ideology. And now today he made a really quite just uncharacteristically classless. It lacks class what Chalmers has done. He's criticising Taylor for essentially being born with a silver spoon in his mouth or something. It's really just nasty politics.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice you mentioned a few of the better people in the Labor tent: Andrew Charlton, Andrew Lee, Daniel Molino, and I couldn't help but note those are three proper economists. And the one that you put on the other side is someone who has his PhD in politics. So it's an old battle of which are the real disciplines, which is the mother of the social sciences, the good economists sitting in the background of Labor, getting it less wrong, but having nobody listen to them, which unfortunately, I'm not sure Andrew Lee has got much factional power inside the Labor machine. But I do agree with you that he's, from all accounts, I've had a few interactions with him. He seems like a good man who's genuine, does the best he can. He was a very interesting addition to the economic commentariat before he went into politics. I fear that even though minds like him would be great to have in politics, Australia as a country was worse off when he switched from academia and commentary into politics because he had to shut up, right? He couldn't speak freely as a genuine independent thinker. And I'm not sure he had enough political power to get much done in Labor. He did lose a political commentator who was good to have around. But anyway, that's a bit of a sidetrack. Look, going back onto the CGT point, I take your point about trust. We'll wait and see if there's progress there. But if I had just one silver bullet, I would shoot the CGT policy in the head or modify it radically. And here's the point I want to make. It's a tricky topic because capital gains tax, let's be honest, a lot of people just earn a Labor income and they don't really interact with the CGT system. So their eyes just glaze over. And for other people, you really have to sit down and listen to how the system works to be able to have a nuanced opinion of it. And who has the time to do that? I mean, besides the wonderful people who listen to our show, Gene, and you and I, very few people are getting into the weeds on CGT. So I just want to say one thing at the macro level. Labor is doing two things. They are changing the style of capital gains tax, and they are changing the level of capital gains tax. And because two changes are happening at once, it can be easy to kind of lose the wood for the trees. So they're changing the style because they're getting rid of the discount, but introducing indexation. Now, we could talk about what that means another time, but the point is that change in style, I would argue, is neither good nor bad. It's you have cases in both directions. It's not the end of the world. If you did it the right way, it could be fine. Right? It's also probably not going to be wonderful either, but it's if you did that the right way, it would be fine. But unfortunately, they've smuggled in, they've said, look, we're just changing the style of our CGT approach. And they've smuggled in a significant increase in the level of CGT that people will be paying. And I think it's worth disentangling those two things, because in my opinion, it's not the change in approach that's the problem. It's the fact that they've smuggled in a tax increase. That's the problem here. And look, I even have some sympathy with the idea of changing the style, but they've done it in the wrong way. They've messed it up. And unless they're going to do radical reforms, then they just should bin the whole thing and stick with the 50% discount. And in our latest newsletter, I've suggested a list of 6 ways, if you did want to change the style, how you could fix the system. At one point, you've heard me say before, Gene, that if they're going to index it, they're indexing it too low. They're being too miserly. Indexing the cost base to inflation isn't good enough. They need to factor in some sort of nominal rate of return to compensate at least for the time value of money. But there's other things as well. One of the problems with having people just pay their marginal rate on capital gains, marginal tax rate on capital gains, is Australia's marginal tax rate is just far too high.
Yeah.
So if they'd done something about that, then it would be easier to stomach this change. And no more interesting commentator than Paul Keating has been repeatedly on the record saying that it's ridiculous that our top marginal tax rate is above 40%. And he's right. So it should be brought down to 40% at the maximum. I'm trying to remember what the other changes were that I was suggesting. I was just looking it up now and I can't see them. That's an unfortunate dead air. But look, the other problem with the indexation approach, this gets too much in the weeds, but you'll just have to trust me. It basically also still leaves you in a situation where some people may be paying tax on assets that are appreciating only due to inflation. So it's you need to allow people to be able to reset the value of their assets every year if you want to avoid that problem. And there are a few other problems. The other issue is currently small businesses up to $2 million turnover can get a nice capital gains tax discount, but that's not indexed. That's far too low, right? So you need to increase the eligibility for those other discounts. Now, if the government went to, and one other one, sorry, it's all coming to me a bit delayed. Apologies. This is what you get with live TV. The government has introduced absurdly a minimum tax of 30%. Now, this is ridiculous. This is remarkable. Think about this. We've got a progressive tax system of 0 to 15 to 30 to 37 and 45, right? A progressive tax system. And they're going to say we're a minimum of 30. Does that impact the rich people? I mean, they're already on 45%. So a minimum of 30 means nothing to them. They're already above that. If you're on 37, it means nothing to you. If you're on a marginal rate of 30%, it means nothing to you. It only impacts poor people. It is remarkable. This is coming from the Labor government. They are introducing a system that increases capital gains tax. This particular part of the policy increases capital gains tax only on people earning less than $45,000 a year.
But John, just on that, I mean, I take your point, but I think what they will be saying is that some of those people who are facing those lower tax rates are not poor people, and that they've been able to minimize their income or in various ways to try to have a lower tax rate. So I think that's where they're coming from. I mean, I don't agree with that 30% minimum. I think that was a huge surprise, but I think that's where they're coming from, just to steelman their arguments. So they're concerned about tax minimisation, aren't they? Or people avoid.
Yes, no.
Not that I have a
think what they'll
problem
be
with that.
saying
I
is
think
some
it's
people
good
on
that.
low. I think one of their arguments is some people on low incomes will be married to other people on high incomes. So I think that's probably what they're
Yes,
aiming for here.
right.
They want to avoid the possibility of income splitting. As you know, I'm an advocate for income splitting, but I mean that's
Yes.
kind of, they're trying to get it both ways, right? I mean, if they target all of their welfare at people with low income, and then in those contexts they say, oh, but people on low income really need the welfare benefits, and then they turn around and say, oh no, but some of these people are secretly rich. They don't make those cases when they're talking about welfare benefits, right? So it's that if they're going to use low income as the proxy for helping people, then it's odd that they take that away selectively.
Yeah, good point.
And it also just takes away the consistency of it. That we now have different tax-free thresholds for different types of income. So we've got 3 different tax-free thresholds now. We've got a tax-free threshold if you earn labor income, a tax-free threshold if you earn non-labor income but not capital gains like dividends or interest. That's a different tax-free threshold now because you don't get the workers' tax offset.
Yes.
And then you've got a different tax-free threshold for capital gains, which is 0. So we are making the tax system frustratingly more complex with these changes. So I don't appreciate that one either. So anyway, if they made a bunch of changes to their policy, it may be salvageable. I think there's no chance they'll make those changes. The biggest one is they need to index at a rate much higher than inflation. And that is the thing that would actually stop this being a tax hike.
Yeah.
So that's
then they don't get the money. They want the money, John. It's all about they need those billions in the budget. They need it's $4 billion over the forward estimates, but it'll grow over time as more and more capital gains are accumulated. Yes, it's because I think it starts because it doesn't kick in till next year, if I remember, 1 July 2027. So yeah, it will grow over time, but we know it's a money grab. I mean, they'll say it's about intergenerational equity, but really it's all about the dollars. Let's face it. They've taken a lot of political pain for it. I think maybe they thought they were better political communicators. They could spin their way out of it, but it's backfired badly. And now when people ask them about are you going to introduce a death tax? Oh no, of course we're not going to introduce inheritance taxes.
Trust me, my word is my bond.
Yeah. Who's going to believe them? What I find fascinating, there was a question, I mean, maybe we'll put it up later, but someone in the chat was asking about, well, what are the chances of this getting through? Hard to know, because I think the Greens would like it to do more. I mean, ultimately the Greens will support something along these lines because it's consistent with their ideology. But there's a lot of resistance from the business community, and also Allegra Spender's starting to have doubts about it. But she's in the lower house, so she can't really hold it up in the Senate. She's concerned about the impact on the startups. I think the Greens are concerned about the way that Labor's introducing it, because it was so poorly thought out and they didn't do the detailed policy work or the consultation they needed to just sort out all of the tricky issues. They've had to introduce this bill into the Parliament, which gives Jim Chalmers extraordinary powers to change these tax policy settings. And that's even upsetting the Greens. They go, hang on, what's going on here? Like, you can't give a minister that amount of power, or particularly around taxation, where in the Constitution, I mean, this is something that has to be decided by the Parliament. So to give Jim Chalmers this extraordinary power, which is what they're going to have to do to get this up and to actually implement it, I think that's a concern for the Greens. So, yeah. Maybe there will be.
I'm very pleased to hear that. I don't know much about the Greens' concerns on this legislation.
Yeah, Shoebridge.
My instinct had been until the moment that the Greens will try to make it. They'll try to toughen it up. They'll pretend they're going to block it, saying they want to increase the tax further. But ultimately, when the legislation comes forward and they're forced to vote, I suspect they'll vote for it. It's already passed the lower house. It's going to the
Yep.
Senate. The Senate has a very rushed Senate inquiry where they are basically denying speaking opportunities to anyone who's going to be critical. There's an article in the Australian Today saying a whole series of people who are going to give some pointed feedback have been disinvited from speaking to that. But I mean, it's a rushed committee anyway, and the committee has 3 Labor, 1 Green, 2 Coalition on it. So it's got 4 out of 6 that are going to wave it through. And then that committee will get back to the Senate, and next sitting week, basically, it'll go. I think the only chance of stopping it is that Labor finds some face-saving way of partly backing down and calling it a restructure, and they do it for political reasons. And I hope that could happen. I mean, we can try to create enough pushback and political pain. If we ask them to cancel everything, they won't do it. That's why I've been starting to think, if I just had one silver bullet, what could we change? And I started thinking, what tweaks could we make to make it less bad? And then, or just cancel the whole bloody thing. I like to sometimes play the maximalist role in politics. You know, what's everything I would change if I could? But another interesting line of inquiry is what's inside the Overton window, what's achievable now. Labor and Greens have the numbers. Labor is not going to stand up and go, I suck, I'm terrible, I did a terrible thing and destroyed the country, I'm very sorry. They should say that. They're not going to. So what is a way out here? What is something where they can say, look, you know, we want to do something, but I'm just going to tweak it this way to make it better. I think indexing, if they want to index, all right, index to inflation plus 2%. That would be one way to make this less damaging. And they would be able to save face. I mean, people won't even understand that change, right? So they would save face. They wouldn't look like they're backing down, but they would take away a lot of the elements of this policy that will really screw up our economy. But yeah, I'm not overly confident. But look, it's what we can do at the moment for the listening audience and ourselves is we can try to bang the drum as loud as we can to make people aware that this isn't just someone else's problem. Even if you don't have assets that are going to get stung with CGT, this policy is almost designed as an anti-productivity measure. The irony here that the government had a productivity summit last year. And out of that productivity summit, the only idea they had is to tax productivity higher. Is quite depressing. This is directly going to put downward pressure on private investment, which is the very thing you need to encourage if you want productivity. There's going to be less private investment, fewer businesses, less business growth. That also is going to mean, you know, fewer jobs and wages lower than what they otherwise would be. But we mentioned before, we've been in a productivity slump for 10 years. We need to do something to get out of it. This is the exact opposite of what you should be doing. And even if you're not going to be directly impacted, you're going to be indirectly impacted by the fact that our economy just keeps sluggishly going backwards. And productivity slumps do hurt everyone eventually.
Exactly, John. And it's the case, isn't it, that this means we have the highest rate of taxation of capital gains in the world. That's what's being claimed, and I've got no reason to doubt that. I haven't crunched the numbers on it myself, but that sounds right. So yeah, absolutely, it's a great concern.
Well, the tricky part is, of course, with cost-based indexation, it's very hard to do a like-for-like comparison. But yeah, so we've got capital gains taxes now up to the highest rate in the world, depending how much inflation there is and how long you've owned the asset for, et cetera, et cetera. It gets quite messy. But yeah, it's a concern. And then
the other thing,
I was going to say, with no tax-free threshold on it, as we mentioned before, the minimum 30%. The whole thing is just a bit of a cluster. So look, hopefully Labor sees the light. Maybe they see the opinion polls and they decide to change direction. What they could do is just put it into a long-term inquiry. Right? They could put it on the back burner. Say that, I'm going to do it some year, but we just need to put it into inquiry for a year or two and then leave it in the inquiry and just forget about it.
They should bring Ken Henry back and give
he supports it
there. That's right. He may not be the right person there. So, yeah, Richard Holden. Let's get Richard Holden to do the inquiry because
don't get anyone to do it. Just say you're sending. Oh, well, they should get Gene Tunny to do the inquiry. But
yes.
They just have to say they're doing it, leave it in the inquiry, and never talk about it again. Then they've got the political cover. but
Yeah.
that's probably not what's going to happen. But anyway, look, I suspect it's on track to pass. But for what it's worth, kick up a stink. Pick one thing. Pick the one thing you hate the most about Labor's policy. Kick up a stink about that, and that's all we can really do, right? So
Exactly.
sort of a
But
coup, and I'm recommending a coup.
just while I remember regarding Richard Holden, he wrote an absolutely brilliant op-ed in the Fin Review a couple of weeks ago. I think it was while you were on training, about why the government's message around, well, we're going to be taxing capital income like labour income. And he was saying, well, that doesn't actually make any sense in economic theory because of the risk element associated with capital income. And there's good reasons from an economic point of view why you would tax capital income lower. I mean, for one, you're buying you're investing, or you're saving and investing out of after-tax income for one. And yes, you want lower taxes on capital to encourage entrepreneurship. So I thought that was a really excellent column. I don't know, did you see that, John? That column of Richard?
I haven't. I must have been locked away in Kapuka at the time. But look, the obvious economic point is that people just respond more to capital taxes as well. There's a higher elasticity, right, which means that unfortunately, I don't want this to be the case. I'm just observing reality. That the behavioral response to wage taxes is relatively low. It's not zero, as some weirdos claim, but it is relatively low compared to other elasticities out there. The elasticity to capital tax is much higher for the very obvious reason that most people need a job, but not everyone needs to forego current consumption, make sacrifices now to save, to invest in a risky business. Not everyone has to do that, right? That's kind of discretionary. And also just the simple point that if money is going to cost you 10%, if an investment's going to cost you, say, 10% return, you'll do it if you're making 20%. But if you're only making 9%, you just won't do it. There's a really easy cutoff, will or will not do next investment based on your expected return from that investment. And if you lower the return, you lower the investment. So that's the economic point. But I take a step back from that because I can understand the response. There's two arguments. One is treat all income equally. The other one is treat income depending on its behavioral response, right? Depending on the elasticity, right? Yeah. If you wanted to maximize economic efficiency, you'd do the latter. What that unfortunately means is you tax capital income less than labor income, and you can understand why people are annoyed by that, right? The equity issue, the seeming unfairness, because a lot of normal people just earn a wage. Why do they have to pay higher taxes? My complaint, I think you can sidestep that by just noting they're not even introducing equal taxes because they're not compensating for the time value of money.
Yes.
And that's why I make that point, right? I'm not arguing to index it to like the PRRT has roughly the system I'm suggesting, but they index to inflation plus like 10 or 15 or 20%, right? They index very generously in the PRRT. If I was just trying to lower capital tax, I would be saying, yes, index it to inflation plus 10%. But I'm saying just to 2% to compensate for the time value of money. That's consistent with their argument. If they meant what they said, that they wanted consistency in the tax system, then that's their approach. And also, if they want consistency in the tax system, you can't take away the tax-free threshold on capital gains, and you should apply the same approach to interest income as well, which is another little bugbear that we treat all the different types of income differently.
Yes.
Right? Wage income, interest income, dividend income, and capital gains are all taxed differently, which is absurd. And they are not proposing a system that is going to equalize the treatment. My system would be closer to doing that. So if they meant what they said, if they're genuine in their arguments, come and meet me.
Yeah.
But I'll have to get that article. So anyway, we mentioned one thing. You mentioned one thing earlier that segues us on to maybe the last topic for today. So I'm going to try and get into a habit of not going for 2 hours in the future, Gene. I think you're
okay. Yes.
But that Labor's had a bit of a tough time politically with the fallout from this budget. It hasn't worked as well as they hoped. I think they were hoping that the complexity of changing the CGT system was going to trick people. Like, we're just changing the style, right? You remember there was a lot of discussion early on. Are they going to have a 50% discount or a 40% or a 30% discount? In that context, there's no change of style. It's just a change in number. They're just the baddie, right? I think they thought if they changed the style, they could hide the fact that they were increasing the tax. And it seems they haven't got away with it because there's been enough of a furor from the investor class and the opposition parties. It
And
has
from
meant
people
that
who, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I was just thinking it's not just the invest. Well, I suppose he is an investor, but it's Husey. It's people you wouldn't expect. The comedian came out very strongly on Twitter or TikTok or whatever it was, and just say, "Oh, this is just terrible. They lied." And when you got people like that, like usually these types of policy measures, they don't really cut through, and people it'd just be you and I, or the commentariat talking about it. But when you've got comedians talking about it, and people are going to be they're talking about it all around Australia, and even if they're not investors or they don't have investment properties, they're hearing it from their friends or their relatives. Oh, this elbow, he's really screwed us over, and it's just not good word of mouth for the government.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people have started. I mean, a lot of Australians are investors or planning to be investors, and not just in property, but in other places too. So I think maybe more people were aware of what the government was taking away than they expected. But anyway, one consequence has been Labor's going down in the polls. So, of course, Gene, I've been out of the loop. I have seen the headline. You would have seen this more closely than I, but I'll just throw you the Dorothy Dixer. Given Labor's going down in the polls, I assume that means the Liberals are riding high. Is that right, Gene?
No, not at all. I mean, they're stuck around, under 20 at the moment, like in that 18 to 20 band, whereas One Nation is rivaling Labor. I mean, One Nation's taken votes from both Liberal, National and Labor, but primarily from the coalition. I mean, the great bulk of it. And so One Nation's up around 30% on one poll and beating Labor at 28, 29. So, I mean, I think it's an existential moment for the Nationals. I think this could be the end of the National Party as we know it. It looks like they're going to pick up a lot of Liberal seats, but they need to win Labor seats if they're going to form government. I don't know whether they're going to have any capacity to do that, but they've got an impressive fundraising machine. They've raised $2 million in the last day or two based on that Fire the Liar campaign. James Ashby seems to be just incredibly savvy with the social media, and who knows? I mean, stranger things have happened, I suppose, than Pauline Hanson becoming Prime Minister. I wouldn't rule it out. I still think that Labor will sneak in next time. They'll lose a lot of seats, but I think it's just insurmountable. I can't see One Nation winning, but they'll do a lot of damage next election. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, well, Topher's made the case that he thinks the more likely path is that this next election will be the election where One Nation replaces the coalition as the official opposition.
Yeah.
And the election after this is the one where they will be able to sort of build up the experience, wherewithal, capacity to then take on and defeat Labor. I don't know if that's how likely that is, but that's a decent argument. Of course, if Pauline wants to become Prime Minister, she'd need to move to the lower house at some stage. Apparently, there is some scuttlebutt that she's considering running for either Blair or Oxley.
Yeah.
And these are two seats, or Ford, I think, was the other one. It was Blair or Ford.
Blair's more likely. I think Oxley has...
Blair is a Labor seat. So you mentioned before that if One Nation wants to win government, they would need to take Labor seats. There are a bunch of Labor seats that are in their sights, including Blair, which could be Pauline's seat herself, which would be a brave move, perhaps the politically courageous and good gamble to take, to show that she's not just trying to knock out the right-wing party. She is directly, personally herself taking it to Labor. That would be good visuals, I think. It would be, good propaganda.
Yeah, well, I think she's more likely to run for Blair. I think Oxley would be too difficult for her just because of the large migrant populations.
No, Blair's what I'm talking about. Blair's Labor.
Yeah, Blair. Yeah, I think Blair's her best option. Yeah, because that's...
Well, Ford is the other one, because Ford is a Liberal seat. It's probably a bit easier for her to win, but I think that would be bad visuals for her to be going after a Liberal seat.
Well, I don't think she cares, does she, about upsetting the Liberals?
No, but she cares about upsetting liberal voters that she's trying to attract. I mean, it's not about upsetting the liberals. Who gives a shit about the machine men in HQ? But it's about, you want to create a perception. I mean, One Nation's gone out of their way to say, we're not fighting the liberals, we're fighting Labor. We're trying to take down the worst government in blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's their pitch, was it axe the liar or whatever, fire the liar? They're going after Labor. And they're quite explicitly saying liberals need to help us defeat Labor, right? That's their public pitch. And I think it is politically the smart position to take, because people on the right are angry at Labor and they want to vote for the party that is the angriest at Labor.
Yeah.
So I think it's in their interest to pitch that way. And I think she would achieve that by running in Blair. Of course, then they'd Barnaby Joyce, likely in New England.
Yeah.
Look, it's still unlikely that they would win. But as the polls keep trending this way, it becomes more possible. I got to say, what do you think would happen? I mean, not throwing any shade, but realistically, they don't have a hell of a lot of parliamentary experience. What would that look like? And is that worth it? What do you think?
Well, it would look like it'd look like the Whitlam government, but with a different political persuasion, right? It'd be chaotic. You'd have changes of ministers. You'd have ministers just misbehaving, and you'd have a government. Yeah, look, I don't know. It could be chaotic. There's no doubt about that.
That's a great line, actually. I think that's a genius pitch. Like, One Nation would be like the Whitlam government of the right, probably with all of the associated, as people would see it, benefits and downsides to it. I think
it'd be interesting. It would be, it'd be different. I mean, I think, I think people are very concerned. I mean, it could happen, but just because of the level of concern about immigration, the challenge they've got is that such a high percentage of the population are immigrants. Okay. What is it? 30% of people were born outside of Australia, and the number with a parent. Sorry?
I was born outside Australia.
Yeah, exactly. Or the percentage with a parent, at least one parent from outside Australia, is 50%. I don't know if maybe it's not that high, but it's a high number, right? So it's a challenge for them. I think it's going to be very difficult for them. Possibly, what I find is a scenario that I'm increasingly worried about is that we have, I mean, what if we don't, like, One Nation doesn't win? I mean, I think there'd be risks of that. I'm not necessarily saying vote One Nation, but what we could have is if Labor gets back in and they're not able to get immigration down significantly and deal with all the concerns about infrastructure, then we'll just have this ongoing level of dissatisfaction. And if we don't get productivity growing and we don't have living standards rising, we're just going to have ongoing social tension, building up of, of all of that tinderbox. We could have, look at what's happening in Northern Ireland and Belfast at the moment, right? I mean, I don't know if we could get there, but if we have a rerun.
Anna had this point for you earlier when we talked about productivity. She
yeah.
said, Jean might ask the people of Belfast if productivity is the main driver of their living standards and not social homogeneity. I think she misunderstood your point. I think productivity is a problem, and so is social cohesion. It's not either or, but yeah, it is a worrying trend.
Yeah. Well, I think we could have another session, John, where we talk about, well, what are the drivers? I mean, what are the fundamentals behind productivity? And then we can get into, there's the whole Deirdre McCloskey argument about the bourgeois values that have enabled the Western European countries that enable them to thrive, that encourage savings and thrift and then capital accumulation and the hard work, that Protestant work ethic. I mean, there's that argument in that's more fundamental. So we say productivity, and that's a very abstract concept. But underlying productivity is a whole bunch of behaviours that we just take for granted, I suppose. But we could unpack them in a future episode.
Well, we do it every time. I'm going to do it right now. There's the rant I normally do. You have to fix productivity. To fix it, the only solution is private investment and innovation. That's basically, innovation comes from private investment itself anyway. So you need the private investment. That's to invest, you need savings. So you need to have that savings ethic, which is where those values, those Protestant, particularly Calvinist sort of values kick in, where the Calvinists save even when they don't have to, even when it makes no sense. But God bless them. There's probably good for our countries. And yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think we have unpacked that quite a bit, where we talk about if you don't get that saving and investment up, then you're not going to be able to solve it, which is why I've always argued to get this in as well, that we should make savings tax deductible, or at least some amount of savings tax deductible, to incentivize that saving and investment domestically as well. But yeah, sorry, that was my interruption there.
I know that's all I wanted to say, really. I'm just concerned that, I mean, what the worst situation could be is if we don't end up, we just sort of continue business as usual, because business as usual isn't working, right? So that could end up being the worst situation of all.
Yeah, and the point you make, if it's a scary point, I hesitate to say it because it sounds like a threat. I don't mean it as a threat. It's just as a political observation. Once people come to the conclusion they can't vote their way out of trouble, what have you left them with? And Belfast is a scary example for that. And no one really wants that outcome. But just observing the history of humanity and the options available, their only option is to do things a non-democratic way, or to just give up. And both of those are depressing scenarios. Now, the slight pushback I'd give is I'm not convinced that all migrants are against an agenda of slowing down immigration. Indeed, I see very little evidence that new migrants are big fans of big migration. There is a very common attitude of closing the door behind you, right? A lot of migrants would be very much against kicking them back out of the country, but a lot of them could be quite sympathetic to the idea of slowing down the immigration hordes coming in. So I don't think that's necessarily a lost cause, except that if you keep bringing in enough people quickly enough and ghettoize them, that ghettoized block becomes an ethnic voting block, which creates a political dynamic of everyone just offering handouts to ethnic groups, which fundamentally retards the nature of democracy. And we see this everywhere in the world, basically, that isn't the West that attempts democracy. Japan did it correctly. Japan has a proper democracy, Taiwan, Korea, but a lot of places, Iraq's democracy, when Zimbabwe tried a fair election, everyone just voted their ethnic or religious line. And that happens a lot, right? Where people just vote their religious or ethnic line. I mean, in Malaysia, you've got your Malay parties, your Indian parties, and your Chinese parties. And very few Chinese people or Malays or Indians vote outside their ethnic party. And that's not what you want in a democracy. I think it undermines the whole point of a democracy. And that's a concern. So we need to avoid that. But I have not given up on the idea that recent migrants could come around to seeing things the same way that we talk about them, Gene.
Okay, yep. I wonder. I mean, I still think. Anyway, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think One Nation's definitely overtaken the Liberals and the Coalition for Good now. I think they'll maintain that. Unless there's some huge scandal or Pauline says something completely insane, perhaps it could be threatened. But otherwise, I think they'll be they're the main opposition Labor's got until the next election.
Well, I'd say that I've made this point before. I still think we've got the Victorian state election coming up. It actually looks like the Liberals are doing better than One Nation there anyway, so that won't be it. And there's a New South Wales state election. There are several opportunities for One Nation to make a breakthrough and actually have some power and use that power. And if they use it badly enough, they could implode again. Now, that's not what I'm hoping for. It's not what I'm wishing for. It's not even what I'm predicting. I'm just saying that's probably what the Liberals are banking on. They're putting all their money in that scenario at the moment, that One Nation gets some power somewhere, trips over themselves, and then people have to fall back on whatever else they can find. And maybe that won't be the Liberals by then. Maybe they'll have found something else. But it certainly looks like they are an unstoppable machine at the moment. Can I ask you, Gene, what do you make of the suggestion coming from one of the Conservative Liberals, Tony Passon, South Australian member for Barker, I believe, He suggested that One Nation and the coalition come up with a non-aggression pact. I don't know if that's what he called it. That's also what the Nazis and the Soviets called their agreement back in the time before World War II. But a non-aggression pact where they agree not to run in the seats that the other party is targeting. So that sounds like Liberals running scared and saying, please, One Nation, don't run against us in some places so we can keep our seats. He makes the case, though, that if One Nation and the Liberals are spending a lot of their money fighting each other, then they can't funnel all of their money into fighting the Labour Party, which, while it might be a convenient argument, it's also not a silly argument, right? There's some logic to what he's saying there. What do you make? Is it a good idea, and is it possible?
Well, I think politically it's a good idea. I think it's possibly. I can't see why it isn't possible. I mean, I think the coalition is in dire straits, and the Nationals are facing a complete wipeout. So they may well have to accept something like this. So yeah, I think it's very much possible. Labor is hoping that this is like the reverse of what happened in the 50s and 60s, where the left was split between the Labor Party and the Democratic Labor Party, the DLP, and that prolonged.
But the issue there was the DLP. Hoping. But I don't know if it is, because the DLP literally supported Menzies, right? They preferenced Menzies. I don't see One Nation preferencing Labor.
No, yeah, that's actually a good point, isn't it? Yes. But I mean, you had that split. Yes, okay, yeah. So maybe it's not the right analogy, but I think Labor's hoping that the fight on the right is going to keep them in government because there's going to be leakage of preferences, isn't there, from
I suspect what they're hoping is One Nation's success forces the Liberals to shift to the right, and they're hoping that both the Liberals and One Nation go so far to the right that Labor is able to just hoover up all the centre votes.
Right.
There's a logic to it. I think, though, they're making the same mistake that the LNP, the Liberal Party, Coalition Party boffins make, where they assume swing voters are centrist voters. I don't think swing voters are necessarily centrist. I don't think they see politics that way. And I think the center of political gravity has shifted. There is genuine concern about house prices, immigration, social cohesion. And I think that's where the swing voters are. Right. So that's why you get people going from Labor to One Nation, and the Labor and Liberal boffins scratch their heads. How could that ever happen? Swing voters aren't necessarily centrists. They're people passionate about a couple of issues that locks them into one party. It can easily, it was lots of Labor voters, union voters in the past were very skeptical of immigrants because they were competing for their jobs. That exact mentality can take you very easily from Labor to One Nation. So I think Labor, if that's what they're hoping, that One Nation drags the Liberals to the right and dooms them both, I think they've misunderstood the nature of the swing voters. But if One Nation and the Liberals spend all their time fighting each other, that is a lot of wasted energy. So,
yeah.
We will see. We will see. It is very interesting to watch. Anyway, I don't know if that's that old ancient Chinese proverb of "May you live in interesting times." I think it was intended as a swear word. Interesting times was not a good thing in that proverb, but we do, for better or worse, live in interesting political times. So let us then, with your indulgence, Gene, run through a couple of questions. I have been pretty proactive putting up the comments as they've come in. So we have fewer of them saved here. Just right at the end here, we've got a back and forth with Taylor and Anna. An imam testified at the Senate hearings. The Islamic leaders in Australia are vote pooling. Well, we've seen that, right? With Islamic vote, was it Muslim Votes Matters? An attempt at just ethnic and religious voting blocks. Look, there's clearly going to be attempts. We've had... I am not trying to paint myself as an Islamic apologist here. I don't think Australia should be a Muslim nation. So with that caveat out of the way, Muslims have been in Australia for a while. And for the most part, if they came in slowly enough, they just became Australians who happen to be Muslims. Again, I'm repeating the point I made earlier. My concern is if you bring groups in en masse quickly enough, they don't make that adjustment. And I think we're starting to see that change in political behavior, where you are seeing these Islamic groups just sticking together. It doesn't need to be like that. But yes, it is a scary thing that we are potentially looking at. The response here: the Sikhs rally around the killer of Henry Novak in the UK. That was a terrible situation. Did you see that one, Gene? The murder of Henry Novak.
I didn't know about them rally. Oh, well, I know that the mother of the killer hid the knife, didn't she? I don't know about the broader Sikh community rallying around them, but yeah, that was an awful.
No, I don't know
situation.
if that's true either. I'd seen some Sikhs pushing back, so I don't know if that's true. But just that murder of Henry Novak was a disgraceful thing to witness, and the indifference from the police. You're called in for a stabbing, and all you care about is who was racist.
Yeah, shocking.
And yes, so I'll just go back to some of the earlier questions. Well, I have no idea if this is true. Gene, you've been watching more closely than I for the last month. Is Elbow having a stroke, or does he have dementia, or is he just a politician? Because all three would look the same.
Look, honestly, I haven't got that impression. I'll have to pay more attention. I mean, Elbow's never been really known for his eloquence, has he? I mean, he's never really been a great communicator. He's certainly not as smooth as Jim Chalmers. So whether he's getting more slurred or not, I don't know. I'll look out for that one, Lyndon. There's talk that I think Andrew Clennell's predicting he might actually pull up stumps next year. So I have to see whether he hangs on or not, because he doesn't want to go to the next election and just go through all of get all those questions about is his word his bond and is he a liar? So he may actually retire to his beachfront mansion with his new bride. So
it's not a terrible idea. Very few people get to go out on their own timing.
So yeah, because they get full. They love the power. I mean, John Howard should have. Howard should have gone in 2006. Costello was ready, and the Costello wouldn't challenge at the last minute for some reason. Just I don't know. Didn't have the. Maybe I don't know. I guess it'd be a hard one because Howard was so. He had so much. Respect that people loved Howard in the coalition, so it would have been hard for Costello to challenge him. But yeah, that would
have been tricky. But you think if you have the killer instinct, although I got to say I don't know either of those gents, Peter Costello or John Howard. I met them both once in passing. They wouldn't remember me, but it is difficult because you say Costello lacked the killer instinct. I don't know if he's a nice guy, but what if he just happens to be a nice guy that wouldn't want to do that to a mate? And kind of thinks you should step aside for me. If you don't, I'm not going to cause waves. I'm not going to cause drama. I'm not going to create friction in the party. I'll put myself second. Now, maybe he just lacked the guts, but
I don't know. I mean, I genuinely don't know. I didn't mean to criticize him about that. I just know that there was that there was an almost challenge. He came very close, but pulled back at the last minute, and it's unclear why on earth he did that. I think it would have been, I mean, maybe he didn't have the numbers and it would have just been foolish and he would have blown up the whole government and risk they'd just lose any chance of winning the next election then. But it probably would have been a good thing if Howard had stepped down at that stage and let Costello take over. Yeah.
Especially with 2020 hindsight. That is true. What's annoying about our taxes that they are spent on anything other than roads and garbage collection? Well, we haven't spent much time talking about it here, but the issue of the government's spendthrift nature is at the heart of a lot of the problems, especially the budget problems, the debt problems. It's not a tax problem. It's not that they are not raising enough tax. They are raising more tax than ever before. The tax as in real per capita terms is higher than it's ever been. And pretty much that's a true statement nearly every year for the last 50 years. So they're not short on tax. It's just they're short on ability to restrain their spending and allocate that spending effectively. I would just say, just in passing, Anna, that garbage collection is done by the local councils. I don't want the federal government to get involved in that. And a lot of roads is done by the states, primarily done by states, actually, rather than federal government. So I don't know if I'd want the federal government doing roads and garbage collection, but the underlying point is true, that they're not spending it so well. As the famous quote from Kerry Packer, anyone who doesn't minimize their tax is a mug. They're not spending it so well that we should be donating extra, which is a wonderful phrase, a wonderful term.
It was based, as they say now. Yeah, I love it. Just on one of the big problems is this: it's all entitlements. So it's hard to manage or control the growth of entitlements, isn't it? They'll create an entitlement by law, and it's very difficult for them to predict what they'll end up spending on it. NDIS, for example. I mean, they create this system. They'll think, like, if everyone behaved in a way that you only are treating or giving money to people who generally need it, or you're helping them out, then maybe you can contain the costs. But as soon as you create any government program like this, you're going to have people find ways to get access to that pot of money. And then the demand on it, the needs, they just keep growing. We want to, help everyone or provide this really high level of service, and it just becomes very difficult to control the costs. And I think that's partly why people are frustrated, because they see, people know the NDIS has been rorted. We see all the videos, we see the reports of it. We probably know people we suspect are rorting the NDIS, and that's part of the dissatisfaction that we're experiencing in Australia at the moment.
Yeah, when the NDIS topic comes up, I always make this point. I'm going to make it again. There are people rorting it, no doubt. There's a bigger problem, and that is if you got rid of all the rorts, it would still be unaffordable.
Yes.
And so I worry sometimes when we put the conversation in the term of rorts, because that's politically the best way of doing it, because everyone's annoyed at the rorts. But if what you do is you get political buy-in to cracking down on the rorts, once you've done that, you've got no political buy-in for the next step. People need to be aware that NDIS was structurally and fundamentally a dumb idea. Now, not the idea of helping people with disabilities.
Yes.
But the idea that you would tell parents, if you can find someone who says that little Johnny has ADHD or is on the spectrum, then we will give you thousands of dollars in a free trip to Europe. You've got to factor in that a bunch of parents are suddenly going to discover that little Johnny has ADHD or autism. Behavioral responses are real. That's the big insight that economists have that non-economists don't get, that we have to keep repeating ad nauseum. Behavioral responses are real. People adjust to incentives. And as you say, when they looked at NDIS, they looked at the current number of people with problems and thought, well, we could fix that by offering them money. Not factoring in that the offer of money will change how many people self-identify as having those problems.
Yeah.
And there is no area of life where people don't respond to incentives. And yet it seems to be tricky to get politicians to understand that. As the great economist Thomas Sowell said, that the first law of economics is that scarcity exists and decisions must be made between competing priorities. The first law of politics is to ignore economics. And we have that here with the role of incentives. Politicians constantly ignoring the role of incentives. So NDIS has got problems with rorts, but it's also got problems with incentives. And unless you address the second part of that as well, it is not going to become a sustainable government program.
All
right. Taylor makes the point that the capital tax system, we are running the risk of people just moving to more capital favorable locations. Two quick comments on that. One is, with capital, you don't have to move yourself. You can just send your money, which is why there's much greater behavioral response, right? I mean, if you're going to change your job, that might actually mean you have to move to Dubai or America. That's a much bigger transaction cost. It'll slow you down. But if all you have to do is shift your money there while you stay in your current house, much easier to do. And the second little comment I'll make is, I'm not sure UAE is a great place to be investing right now. Maybe wait till the war's over. Make sure that the UAE still exists as a country.
Well, New Zealand's where people are talking about. Have you seen that? Because they don't have capital gains. Yeah, exactly. So they're going, Aussie entrepreneurs, come over here. There's a little bit of adjusting to the language. Yeah, they've been making some cheeky comments. But generally it's similar to Australia. Just it's a little bit of a language issue, but
Well, I said before that I'm one of those dirty immigrants into this country. I was born in New Zealand, right? So that's
Yeah.
I jumped over the ditch when I was 3. I don't even remember it. I don't even go for the All Blacks. So I'm not a New Zealander. But another one from Taylor. Every person I've spoken to has heavily criticized Albo. More popular topic than State of Origin. I was in the Army recruit course during the State of Origin, and I'm glad I couldn't watch the game. It sounded like a heartbreaker, but that's a different topic. Yeah, look, if people are talking about their anger at Albo more than the love of footy, that is a dangerous situation to be in. Although I do wonder if people are getting caught in echo chambers. Labor still seems to be ahead in two-party preferred. They're still picking up roughly 30% of the vote. I don't know. I have no greater insights there, but he does seem to be creating a different difficult political environment for himself. You have any comments on that one?
I think it has broken out of those echo chambers. I mean, the fact that Husey made that video, and there's more people talking about this than about tax policy settings than ever. Really, it's yeah, and it may not be. I mean, maybe it is a slow burn. Maybe it's. I think the whole credibility thing is going to cost Elbow. I think it leaves them exposed to a scare campaign. Well, may not be a scare campaign, but a campaign that next election say, well, what else will they? What taxes will they increase next time? You can't believe these guys. It makes them very vulnerable to that, and they don't have a good response. I mean, the whole thing about we changed our position. I mean, it's just a weak.
It's also so transparent, right? It's so transparent that they changed
Yeah.
their position to the one that they always wanted all along, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You make a good look. John Ruddock has made the point before. He says he thinks people are ruling out the right of politics too early. He still thinks Angus Taylor could win the next election, and I actually think that's not a laughable prospect. It is not certain. Labor's ahead in two-party preferred polls, but there is a good case to be made against them, and they're not running very high. They haven't got a great primary vote, so anything could happen. Especially how quickly politics is changing. Look, speaking of my friend John Ruddock, Lyndon Harnell here says, remember the Battle of Broken Hill. I'm not actually sure what that's in reference to, but I'm going to spin off it anyway. John Ruddock has a podcast called The Political History of Australia that you can find on Apple and Spotify and the YouTubes. I watch it on YouTube, which is going through at the moment the early colonial history of Australia. It is a fun listen. If you haven't found it yet, go and find it. Go type in Political History of Australia into YouTube and binge the first 20 or 30 episodes. He's just got up to the Rum Rebellion. But we should do a session on that, Gene. There is some really interesting economics going on underneath the Rum Rebellion, which we don't have time to do now, but maybe I will write that one up soon.
Yeah.
And yes, he's already covered the Battle of Broken Hill. There's a few messages that have come in since I've looked at them. Fraser's Razor Gang. This is Malcolm Fraser. Yes. Well, that was before my time, but as I understand it, ended up being a bit of a disappointment. Oh, you did not, Anna. That is a lie. I have no accent. Everyone else in the world has an accent. I have none. No, seriously, I came over when I was 3. So, look, to be fair, maybe I picked up some hints of my parents' accent. I've traveled a lot, so I'd like to think I have a world's accent. But I've been in Australia since 3. I don't know how much of an accent I had from before then. And I don't say fush and chops. Thank you, Anna. I appreciate that comment. I think that is a wonderful note to end on. Because, Gene, you'll remember the time we were getting a lot of free personality assessments from our audience. Well, this is a personality assessment or a critique that I much more enjoy. So thank you, and I appreciate it. With that said, Gene, what is your takeaway from today's chat? What have you learned? What did you find interesting?
I found your restatement of the reasons for preferential taxation of capital. I thought that was capital income. I thought that was excellent. The behavioural response. Look at what's the behavioural response from these taxes, and because capital can move, it's footloose, so to speak. Therefore, it makes sense to have lower taxes on capital income than labour income. I thought that was a good way of explaining it. So good work.
Appreciate it. And I think it's not a bigger exciting point, but the national accounts coming out again with another negative quarter.
Yeah.
So we are going backwards. It has been a depressingly recurrent theme for the last 4 years. And I can't see how that's going to be fixed until we honestly address productivity. And spoiler, the wrong answer is to increase the tax on investments. So if anyone is listening in from the current Labor government, get rid of your CGT reforms or radically change them, please. With that all said, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Gene, and thank you to the listening audience at home. This is Death and Taxes, your weekly live stream podcast from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. You can find what we do at taxpayers.org.au or Oz Taxpayers, AUS taxpayers.substack.com. Please go there, have a look around, sign up. If you like what we do, please consider becoming a financial member. It's a couple of dollars a month. You can pay more if you like. We'd appreciate getting more if you can. But it's just a couple of dollars a month to be able to be a financial supporter for the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. And this show helps us to keep the lights on. We do then send you one email a week if you're on the mailing list. But I think it's worthwhile. It's good quality economic and political content. And then we are back here every Thursday evening from 8 p.m. during winter, East Coast time. So we will hopefully see you again next week. So, Gene, thanks for joining.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone.
People at home, thanks for joining. Stay happy and stay free.